Hello, everybody. My name is Darlene, and I have Parkinson's. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about Parkinson's and swallowing disorders. It's not everybody gets it. It can start quite early, but most people don't have a real problem with it until much further into the progression of the disease. But what happens is it takes a lot of muscles in order to swallow, and people don't realize that because they do it so involuntarily, it's just done. That people don't think about the fact that even when they're in utero, they are swallowing. That's part of what they're learning. So it takes over 40 muscles in order to do this. And when your brain is not functioning correctly, these signals to swallow are getting mixed up. And I should preface, I'm not a doctor. This is just what I'm learning as I travel along this road myself. It's become uncoordinated. I guess that's the way you would put it. Like you're trying to swallow and you're becoming uncoordinated, and your swallowing is not becoming effective. Like you might not get the whole amount swallowed down, and choking becomes a real issue. And a lot of times your family doesn't notice it until that happens. The other thing is, along with the same time, your voice may lower and you may be getting softer spoken. It's all to do with the same area. And they would send you to a doctor. I wrote it down what they're called because I didn't have to see this person. Well, maybe I didn't. Oh, a speech language therapist. Okay, so the specialist that you would see there would be a speech language therapist, but not necessarily just for speech. They can help you with speech becoming louder and whatnot, but they help with swallowing disorders. They help train your throat to swallow more efficiently and whatnot. And people think, well, so what if you have a little bit of trouble swallowing? What does that cause? Well, food can get stuck in your airway. Very few people die from Parkinson's. They die from other things, and they have Parkinson's. But one of the things that, as they get to the end of the journey along Parkinson roads, if they're having a lot of swallowing disorders, they can aspirate very easily on their vomit. So therefore, if they choke when they're eating, it can go into their lungs, and that can cause them to then pass away. So it is something that as soon as you recognize that that's something that's happening, you should go in and see one of these speech language therapists to follow along. What do you do with that? There are exercises that you can do, but it all starts with sort of an interview that they do, and they take pictures while you're eating and swallowing, and they can see from your mouth going down in your esophagus and what's happening, how much of it is going down your throat, how much is staying in your throat, how much of it is getting into your airways, and that makes a big difference in how you're treated. Some of the problems that come along with it, you may become a person who drools a lot because you can't swallow your own spit. So you'll see sometimes elderly people sitting in a chair and just drooling. Well, that they're not drooling because they're being lazy and not swallowing. They are having trouble swallowing. So drooling, if they're getting stuff into their, I forgot to turn this light on. That's probably going to cause a big problem. I'll turn it on now. Oh, sorry, I wasn't being very good there. If they were not paying attention to it, they could get pneumonia very easily. If they get a little bit of stuff trapped into their airways, pneumonia is a big possibility, and it's much harder to get over when you have an underlying condition. Weight loss for no explained reason. Well, the reason is you're only getting a fraction of the food. Like you're not eating the same amounts because it's not easy to swallow, so therefore you don't eat the same amount. Weight loss becomes an issue. So what will the speech therapist kind of work on with you? Well, they'll teach you to do a few things. Number one thing they're going to say, and we can all learn from this, eat slower. I'm bad for that. Like you get your food and you sort of start shoveling it in, and they say eat slower. It's much better for you. Chew every bite thoroughly. Don't swallow a great big piece of something because you can choke on that so much easier. Swallow everything that's in that bite before you take another. Some people will sort of chew for a while, swallow some down, and they still have some in their mouth, but then they put the next bite in. That's very dangerous for somebody who has a swallowing disorder. So therefore, you want to learn to swallow before you take the next bite. And then you want to, for the last thing, is avoid high choking foods. That would be anything that's a drier food. Like if there's not enough moisture in the food, you'll choke onto it. If it's thicker, if you're eating something that's thicker, you have to chew it down far more than something that's thin. Or very crumbly. If it's a very crumbly thing, you can quite easily choke on that. So those are some of the things that they will tell you to do, and that sort of covers the swallowing part of what can happen. But those are things that when you first are diagnosed, you don't even think about that. But along the road, you will have to think of it because it may happen to you. It does not happen to everybody, but it may happen to you. Now, I'm going to tell a little story, of course. This is a story that happened many, many years ago. My granddaughter is now 23 years old, but this was when she was very small. She was probably 2, maybe 3 years old. And she loved spaghetti noodles. And we would put just cooked noodles onto her plate, and not necessarily with a bunch of sauce or anything, just maybe a little butter on the noodles, but some cooked noodles onto her tray of her high chair, and she would eat them. Well, as we are all aware, your nose is connected with your throat. That's why they call them ear, nose, and throat doctors, because they're all connected. Well, we didn't notice a thing when Ivy was eating her spaghetti. She was eating it just fine. And then she sort of had a funny look on her face. And then we looked over, and it looked like she had a little booger at the end of her nose. And so her mom reached over to take this little booger off. And she went like this, and it wasn't a booger. She went like this, and she and went to pull it. And out came a long spaghetti noodle. And it just came out, and the look on Ivy's face, her eyes got just big when it was coming out of her nose. We could not believe that poor little child had that. I don't think it went up the nose. I think it went from the back of her throat and somehow got transferred up, and she sneezed or something and it come down to here. But when we saw it, we just went like this, and out, it just pulled all the way out. Oh my word. So anyway, that's my funny story for today. I'll see you all tomorrow.